real upper for Christmas. And yet it's not that different from our time. Things haven't changed that much, and so we have to wonder, what on earth was Isaiah thinking or ingesting when he says this bizarre thing, the people who walked in darkness, they're living in these damaged cities on this damaged earth, everything's bad, have seen great light. And a son's been given to us. And he'll be called Wonderful Counselor and the Prince of Peace. And so 600 years later, when Jesus is born, things have not picked up markedly. The Bible doesn't tell us a lot about the time of Jesus, but a lot of other historical sources do. And what they tell us, things hadn't changed since Isaiah's time. The cities were still desolate, and the buildings falling down, and the land was filled with foreigners, in this case the Romans, who were oppressing the local citizens. And so many people had become so fixed on their own poverty and their difficulty surviving, they were ignoring the widows and the orphans and the marginalized. Before Jesus' time, and during Jesus' time, and in every world that's existed since Jesus' time, including our own, things are pretty gummed up. Somehow we human beings can't seem to get it right. Generation after generation, we keep creating worlds in which wars rage, in which people continue to be marginalized, and in which we continue to prey on the weak, and in which we continue to destroy our earth, and violence of all kinds is prevalent, and nothing seems to get any better. So how do we find real hope in the middle of all of that? And that, I think, is where this very odd story offers us the oddest of all possible hopes. And it does it in part through that very odd promise we heard from Matthew's Gospel, where Matthew is quoting Isaiah, and Isaiah is quoting God. And what God says is, look, a young woman will conceive and bear a child, and he will be Emmanuel, God with us. God with us in the first century for Matthew's people, in the 21st century for us, and not in just some abstract way. God right here, present with us. And that's where and how we find hope in our world today, and that's how the people of Isaiah's time survived, and that's how the people of Jesus' time survived. And the reason I say that is that hope is not just an abstract philosophical idea. Everybody who took Philosophy 101 in college, and you learn basic concepts. Okay, concept, hope. What is hope? Hope, to quote Nietzsche, hope is the worst of evils, for it prolongs the torment of man. Or Bonaparte, a leader is a dealer in hope. Or Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, the setting of a great hope is like the setting of a sun. Not even this one quotation I found that I really like, which is, hope is the feeling that you have that the feeling you have isn't permanent. Hope isn't an abstract theological concept. Whole bunches of us were in catechism classes when we were in 3rd or 4th or 5th grade. Catechism question, who is the hope of the world?
Jesus.
Jesus is the hope of the world. If they had long read, you couldn't get away with one-word answers in catechism. Jesus is the hope of the world. And my guess is that even as like 3rd, 4th, or 5th graders, some of us went, well, what does that mean exactly? I mean, Jesus lived 2,000 years ago. We have no clue when he might be coming back. What on earth does that little figure that we're going to put in that manger on Christmas Eve and what he represents have to do with this homeless man who's part of our community who eats lunch down at the soup kitchen? What does it mean for Jesus to be the hope of the world? And so we're to think about what we mean by hope. We say, well, I really hope for world peace, or I hope my family will find some peace this Christmas, or even, I hope my friend with cancer will get well. When we say that kind of thing, what do we mean? And I think what we mean is something like this. I hope for world peace because that means my son or my daughter who's stationed in Afghanistan will come home safely. Or I hope for peace in my family so that my kids don't fight over dinner and we can all go do something together that's fun, just like we used to do, and love each other the way we used to love each other. Or I hope my friend gets well from her cancer so her children don't have to be afraid of losing their mom. So we can go to lunch together because we enjoy each other's company. Or so she can go back and teach her first graders who are missing her. I believe that hope is embodied absolutely in the relationships we have with each other and in the way that we meet God in those relationships. And it doesn't mean that we sit down and go, you know, I love Connie Clark, and she's my friend, and I love her gifts, and she is such a good spirit. And oh yes, there's God in some magical way. I mean that in a real way. We meet the holy through the relationships that we have each other. And so I want you to look at the person sitting next to you this morning. That's what hope looks like. Later today, if you sit down at a meal table of some kind with somebody else, I want you to look at the person across the table who's listening to you, really listening. And that's what hope looks like. And the next time there's a Little League game, I want you to look at the long-suffering coach. That's what hope looks like in more than one way, actually. And the next time you go to the doctor, I want you to look at the nurse who takes your blood pressure, gives you your medication, or maybe comes out to your home and cares for your loved one. That's what hope looks like. And I want you to look at the woman who's shopping this time of year and she puts some extra Barbie dolls in her basket for Toys for Tots. Because that's what hope looks like. Hope looks like you and it looks like me when we live out of love. And there's a wonderful, I don't know if it's a true story or not, but it's a story I really like a lot that explains how this is related to God specifically. And I invite you to think about the truth of the story. When you were a small child or you had small children, the story's about a little girl who's about 4 or 5 years old. And it's a long, cold, dark winter night. Very dark. Very long. And she's lying in her bed, and she opens her eyes, and there's a giant, hairy, terrifying monster standing right next to her bed. And she does what any sensible child or adult would do, and she screams, "Help!" That was the way that everybody was kind of nodding on this. "Mommy, help!" And what does Mommy do? Mommy grabs herself out of bed and comes into the room, and she sits down on the little girl's bed, and she snuggles up with her and she hugs her and soothes her and all this other stuff. And after she's been there a while, she says, "Okay, honey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to say a prayer, and then Mommy's going to go back to her bed. But you'll be okay because you know God's right here watching over you and keeping you safe." The little girl pauses for about a second and a half and says, "I don't want a prayer, I want God with skin on." I think we all want God with skin on. It doesn't matter how old we are or how powerful or smart or anything else. We all get afraid of things, and there are things to be afraid of in our world. And when we get afraid, and when things are looking hopeless, we want God with skin on. And that's where I think the Christmas story is so powerful. Whatever we do with the details, what it affirms is that there was this man, maybe one unique individual for all time, maybe one among many, but this one man who came and said, this is what God's love looks like. God stands up to bullies. God stands up and advocates for the poor and the powerless. God loves everybody. He showed us what God with skin on looks like. That's that whole Emmanuel thing. That's what Emmanuel means. God with us. God with skin on. And as people of faith, that would be people of faith, most of us are awed enough to believe that in some way, however we understand Jesus' divinity, he shows us what God looks like. And whatever details we do or don't believe to be true about Jesus, most of us are awed enough to believe that he was and is real. And we can have a relationship with him in our lives now. And because we are awed by who Jesus was and is, we are also awed enough then we may choose to live differently than we would otherwise do. We might choose to be peacemakers in a world that's filled with conflicts. We might choose to love other people, or try to love them, who the rest of the world says are unlovable. We might choose to try and find joy or believe joy is possible, even in this broken world. And we might choose to trust our God and to hope, even when every rational piece of information says that's just a foolish thing to do. So this fourth Sunday of Advent, I'm going to invite you to join with me as I did the first 2 Sundays. I don't know if Dan did this last week. But if you can, with some integrity and not more than a little discomfort, affirm with me, yes, I'm a Christian.
Yes, I'm a Christian.
Yes, I am odd.
Yes, I am odd.
Yes, I am odd.
Yes, I am odd.
I believe in making peace.
I believe in making peace.
I believe in loving like God loves.
I believe in loving like God loves.
I believe that joy is possible.
I believe that joy is possible.
And I believe there is always hope.
And I believe there is always hope.
Yes, I'm odd.
Yes,
Yes, I'm odd.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.